Welcome to Voices in the Wilderness. I am Pastor Lorraine Bouffard, Bishop of the Diocese of Connecticut for the American Ecumenical Catholic Church. Before I begin and introduce my two guests, I would like to thank those at Hartford Seminary who have made it very possible for me to do this interview with one of the most distinguished theologians in Britain, who is Dr. Keith Ward. It is a pleasure to have you here on this show. And I understand that, I know that you've written a lot of books, but I'm not going to list them because it'll be over with before we have time to talk. But you are very well respected and internationally known. And also with me here on the show is the Dean of Hartford Seminary, Dr. Ian Markham. And he is not only the Dean, but you teach here also, Dr. Markham, with ethics and theology, correct?
Yeah.
So it so happens that the two of you are teaching a course together, which is not the usual course here. What is it that you're teaching? How is it that the two of you could intersect and teach together? Because your bent is theology, and yours is also. Just tell me how that happened.
The course is called Learning from Others, Constructing Your Theology in an Interfaith Environment. And I've been a great admirer of Keith's work over the years, and I think his comparative theology project, which is some 4 volumes, looking at religion and creation, religion and human nature, religion and community, and religion and...
It must be a 4th, I can't remember what it is.
And it's the first attempt really to do a systematic theology which takes seriously the conversation. And what we wanted to do is try and replicate that in a course. So I was delighted when Keith accepted the invitation to come to Connecticut and to share the course with us. And it is so important that theology is done in conversation with the wisdom of other faith traditions and with secular traditions, because we've got to get over the idea as Christians that there is much that we don't need to learn from other faith traditions. We need to get over that idea and commit to conversation and recognise that the truth, wherever it's to be found, belongs to God. And our task as Christians is to engage with that quest for truth and do so from all the various sources that are available out there for us to learn from.
It's interesting because that was one of my last questions I was going to ask you. So now I have to, see how I'm going to weave my way back to the beginning. But following up with that, one of the questions I was going to ask, and I hope both of you can give me some answers here. What would you say, outside of Christianity or the Abrahamic traditions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, outside of those, what do you think the other faith traditions have contributed to what we're talking about here in theology or the practice of faith or whatever?
Well, I think one big influence has been the Indian tradition, both Buddhist and Hindu, and almost everybody now knows about yoga and doing meditation, and there are lots of groups which teach meditation and yoga, and I think that has led to a recovery of interest in contemplative prayer in Christianity. I mean, it's been there, but just neglected for a long time. And also they thought there might actually be practical techniques for increasing your spirituality, for centering yourself in God, and that it's not just reciting words. I mean, there are specific ways of practice. And so I think that Indian influence, and I call Buddhism Indian because it started there, although it's now exists largely elsewhere. And those have transformed the face of Christianity, I think.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting how the indigenous traditions have much to teach us. The emphasis on ritual, and in Judaism and Islam has much to teach us. We live in a world where actually as you engage with the other, you start then returning to your own tradition and discovering within that much that strands which reflect the wisdom that you've seen more clearly in the other. So, for example, I'm very impressed by the practice of students at Hartford Seminary who pray 5 times daily And that discipline. And when you talk to them, they say, well, we do it because I just know as a fallible human being, it's very easy to live a day without reminding myself consciously of the reality of God, because I get busy and I get preoccupied. So the very discipline of breaking my day into those segments means that at least 5 times a day I remember my Creator and my obligations to that Creator. And in so doing, I live a life which is perhaps, fuller and holier and more giving to others. And that for me was a very important argument that I then took back into my home, and I reintroduced in my own life the discipline of saying grace for meals.
Yes.
And consciously pausing. Plenty of Christian traditions always done that, but I've lost it, and it was engaging with the other that then brought home that important conscious moment where you recognise and celebrate what God does, and that was a result of the encounter with the other.
I think one of the things that has impressed me is the respect for all created beings that we found in the American Indian, and how that respect for the earth is beginning to permeate our own political landscape too. So that I see that as an important contribution. Dr. Ward, this is your latest book called The Case for Religion, and you said at the beginning of this book that here in your own country, Britain, that was about 72% describe themselves as Christian.
That's right, in the census.
In the census, right.
Yeah.
Here in this country, I think we have over 80% who have declared themselves as Christians. And one poll has said that over 90% of the people in this country say they have a belief in God. And yet, I would say in both countries, as you stated, yet the problem is church affiliation attendance. There's nowhere near that number of people that are attending churches. What would you say is the case against religion?
I think that's pretty easy, really. I think in Britain, anyway, there are 3 factors. One is that people don't join anything anymore, and community life is different. You choose your own friends through work or through activities that you do, but it's not localized. So the church as a centre of community has ceased to be very important for people. That's one sociological fact. Then again, the institutions of the church are widely regarded as simply out of touch with how people live and morality and the things people in churches say you ought to do. Most people just don't think they're important or relevant, whereas the things they ought to be talking about they don't mention. So there's a huge moral gap between people's general spirituality and what the churches seem to be saying. And the other thing is that the churches very rarely talk about the most exciting discoveries in the world today in science. You don't get many sermons on the latest discoveries in astronomy, for example. You get Bible stories about how nice it would be if we all walked on the water. And that's really not connecting. It's not connecting with anything of intellect. There's a lack of intellectual connection. And so that's what I would say is the case against institutional religion, anyway.
But would you want to add anything to that, Dr. Markham?
No, I think that's a good summary.
But of course, we're still in favour of institutional religion. If people come to my church, that's good.
Yes, that's
I think before we were talking about the contributions that other faith traditions have given us, and one of them is to think of God differently than the way that I was brought. I have such a terrible time trying to get outside of the box of what I've learned, because it's so much a part of me. And we're trying to see God in a different way, instead of God out there, God in heaven. How would you explain a theistic God today?
I think that's where you start is a good place to begin, and that is that it's quite important we don't just turn God into a big person